Hello, my name's David. I'm an environment artist, and today I thought we'd have a chat about interviews. Might be quite useful, maybe. So I've been in the games industry for about 17 years. I started off as a gameplay programmer and fairly quickly switched over to art. And so I've had a fairly interesting look at different sides of the games industry, so from a code point of view and an art point of view. And I thought it might be quite useful just to sort of, go over them a bit really and see what I remember about them. It's a long time ago for me, and you might find it useful, maybe. Bear in mind it's only my experience, so everybody's got different experiences, haven't they? So, And all the while, I thought we'd do it whilst having a rather nice little cruise around GTA 5's map here. So, I did a computer games technology course, which I started back in 2004, and that was a 4-year university course. And I had already been out in the world sort of working and jobbing about, doing different things for about 10 years after leaving school. And I missed out university first time around, mainly because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And going to university just seemed kind of a bit pointless because I didn't really know what I would do. And I kind of knew that I really wanted to get into games in some way because I wanted to make my career as close to a hobby as I could, which seemed the sanest way of coping with a lifetime of working, frankly. So that was my aim. So I looked around, I found a computer games technology course, and it seemed alright. It was programming focused because me being fairly clueless at the time, I didn't really know much about what went into any of it, to be honest. I knew I'd always loved games, but I didn't really know much about it, the creation process, really. And I had a little dig around, and I thought, yeah, programming, it looks alright, doesn't it? Yeah, that sounds quite cool, making your own games and having all that control over stuff. So, I just sort of jumped in, really, without looking too deeply, fairly impulsive. But I did this course, which was in university in Liverpool in northwest England, and it was pretty cool. I found it pretty difficult, but I was all in, and I just cracked on with it really, and learned lots of stuff, and it was mainly programming in C and C++, JavaScript, Java. We had a little bit of art sort of thrown in there, but it was very focused on programming, and there was even stuff like computer networking and sort of various other things like that. And I came out of that in 2000 and late 2007. You have to bear with me. I'm casting my mind back quite a way here. We're going back a ways, and I came out. I got I did pretty well. I got a first class degree with honours in 2007 in the autumn, and so after we're coming up to the sort of last semester of university, and we're all encouraged to throw our CVs out there, and hunt for jobs and all that sort of stuff. And so that's what I did. I sent my CV off to all sorts of places, as many as I could really. And I had various interviews for non-game sort of places, which I would recommend that actually. Send your CV off to all sorts of places, cast a wide net, and it might not even be a games company, because if you do get an interview, it's pretty good practice. Interview practice is invaluable. If you can, wrangle some interviews, it's actually probably a good idea. Get as much interview practice as you can before you get an interview for that job that you might really want. And it's not that often you get to practice a proper interview, so I would grab every chance to do that. And so I cast my net wide, and I sent CVs to every games company I could sort of think of really. I got an interview with Rare. You may or may not know Rare. They're now Microsoft, but this was before they were owned by Microsoft actually. I think they were still independent at that time. And a few of us on the course got interviews at Rare, and they kind of sent us all along to this sort of testing centre in a nearby city, Manchester. And this consisted of a fairly intense maths test, which only 2 of us passed, myself and one other person, and everyone else failed. And after that, unbeknownst to us, right, they sort of brought us into this room with this camera in it, and then we had to kind of address the camera, and you know, they asked us all these sort of questions. It wasn't even people from Rare interviewing us. It was just like a sort of third-party company that does that sort of thing. And, you know, we were wholly unprepared to be on camera. We weren't told. I thought that was a bit underhanded almost, or fairly inconsiderate process. They should always tell you about these sort of things. And, you know, I probably completely botched it. I mean, I didn't get the job, you know, and I never heard back even, I don't seem to recall. And yeah, because, you know, they caught me out. They caught me off my guard. I wasn't prepared to be on camera, even though I'd, like, you know, passed the test. And, you know, if I'd have passed that one, then we would have gone on to a different process. It was probably some sort of technical test. I think someone from my course did get a job there. He went on, he's probably good on a camera, you know. And he went on, I think he did some technical test, and then another interview. They were pretty harsh, actually, pretty full on. You know, which differs from company to company. Some might be super picky, and some might be a bit more lenient and be more willing to take on a entry level at a sort of, you know, more relaxed sort of basis, rather than like they want everything, you know. Some companies are quite harsh that way. At least they were anyway. I mean, they're probably worse now. You know, but after that was just one down, bit of practice, you know, kind of gave me a bit of confidence in my maths anyway, so that was quite cool. And after that, I sent my CV off to Traveller's Tales, who were looking for gameplay programmers. So I applied for that, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to get that job. You know, I just sort of, I sent it off. I thought, there's no way, man, no way. But I got an interview. Somehow I managed to get an interview. And I turned up to Traveller's Tales office, and I turned up in a suit, which, you know, no one turns up to a games interview job in a suit, I don't think, except me. And so I walked in the office, and everyone's like looking around at me, like thinking, oh, the suit's arrived, you know. I probably thought I was someone from the publisher or something. And yeah, so I turned up in there, and the guy who was interviewing me was called Dave. He was a really nice guy, really helpful and kind to a sort of entry level sort of, you know, newbie. And yeah, as we were walking through, it was like, yeah, don't worry about them. They're not used to seeing suits going through the office. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, damn, I've overdressed for it. Oh no. But yeah, got past that, and the interview was pretty cool actually. He made me feel very relaxed. He was really easygoing. I think he was the technology director, or maybe he became the technology director, and he might have been head of code at that time, something like that. And he just asked me about stuff on the course. You know, he kind of drew me out quite gently, talking about the projects that we'd done, and he was getting a sense of what sort of level of code I was up to, what languages I'd used, things like that. And yeah, it was fairly gentle. And I'd made a little game as part of my portfolio. So, and it was like a side-scrolling sort of, kind of a shooter. It was like, I'd called it Bubble Bobble. Yeah, I'd called it Bubble Bobble. And it was like you had this frog who would swim about. It was set in the river, and you could fire bubbles, and you could capture creatures in your bubbles, and they would sort of float up to the surface of the river and sort of out of your way sort of thing. So yeah, so I'd come armed with that on a disc on its installer, which I was very proud of. I packaged it up into a nice installer, loaded it onto Dave's computer there in the office, and it didn't work. Didn't work at all. And I was gutted. I was like, oh no, it didn't work. And I tested it on different computers and stuff, and you know, that was that. You know, and you know, we ran it again to uninstall it, and I was kind of glad it successfully uninstalled itself. And Dave said like, "Oh, don't worry about it. At least you tidied up after yourself." So it installed and then uninstalled happily. So, in retrospect, I was kicking myself because I was like, I should have brought my laptop in with it on. So there's a little nugget there, isn't it? Don't rely on any installs or anything. Take your laptop in and, show them stuff on that is working. So, so I was kind of like feeling a bit like, oh no, a bit bummed out because it didn't work. I was like, man, that was my little project I was going to show him, and it's got to be great, and he would have been dead impressed, and he would be like, yeah, have the job, it would be cool, you're a great programmer, and it didn't work. So we carried on and just had a chat, and as I say, it was a pretty gentle probing for technical knowledge and languages and stuff like that. And then he started talking about the projects they were doing, and I started to get sort of a bit more hopeful at this point, because he was like talking about, we've got Batman that we're going to be going on to, we've got Lego Indiana Jones that we're going to be going on to, and he was like, oh, what do you prefer out of those two and stuff? And I was like, Lego Indiana Jones would be awesome. I love Indiana Jones. And so we talked about the films a bit and what sort of games I liked, things like that. It was a good interview. He put me at ease. It was relaxed, and he learned a lot about me, probably without me realizing that much. So he was, good at his job, I guess, in that respect as well. And and then so I left feeling sort of pretty mixed. I wasn't quite sure how it had gone. My sort of portfolio piece had failed, but I kind of felt like I got on with him quite well and seemed all right. So I didn't really know what to expect. And often you just don't. You just don't know what to expect after an interview sometimes. And I think it's only a few days later that I found out, they sent me a letter saying I got the job. And I was amazed. Frankly, I was like, oh my God, I got a job. Wow, he's giving me a job. And, it worked out. It worked out really well. And, I was really amazed, as I say. But I guess that, I had chatted and opened up and, been as honest as I could. And, I tried to be as relaxed as I could. You need to sort of relax as much as you can. And a good interviewer will put you at ease as well. No one's interested in making you feel nervous and, just sort of being unpleasant. They want to see you at your best in that interview. So, if you watch my channel, you probably know that I didn't end up as a programmer. And after a while working there, I think it's about 2 years or so, something like that. And after getting friendly with the artist and, sort of getting a sense of the job and seeing what other people were doing, I decided that I really want to try doing art, because this art business looks much more interesting. So, I was kind of feeling a little bit sort of unconfident, dissatisfied. I was sort of restless. I wasn't really happy being a programmer. And I didn't really feel that I was kind of, as good as I should have been. All in retrospect, I think that was just lack of confidence, and I think I could have made something of that had I really, really wanted to, But as it turned out, I was loving the art that the other people were doing there, the art team and stuff, and watching them fill out all the environments in Lego Indiana Jones was cool to see. I really like watching they go from white box to sort of fleshed out environments, and I'd always be going over visiting, seeing what they were doing. And so that kind of solidified it in my mind, and it was really useful, because you really want to be certain of what you want to be doing as a job, or even in what department you'd really like to be in. And once you get that information, you've seen that job in action, as it were, you can make a really informed decision about what you want to do. So it's always good to try and do the job that you want to do as much as you possibly can. And that's why I always recommend, like, the modding scene is great. If you're at entry level, and you don't really know how to do these things, or you don't really know how to even start, get into modding, talk to modders, get onto the forums, find a sort of game that has got mods that you like, and they're always needing help. Modders are always crying out for people who are keen and willing, and you'll learn a lot from it. You'll learn all sorts, and that's the best way to get experience of the job. Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. And modders are a great lot as well. They're really inventive and creative, and they're used to sort of hacking their way through whatever they can in a game engine. And as we know, some game engines are very open to modders and some are not. And a lot of them are used to getting around things. So that a lot of clever people doing that. So yeah, there's some advice right there. But so one day I just got up the courage and I just quit. I quit. I quit on really good terms. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she was just like, just leave and pursue what you really want to do. And so I left that job and ended up taking a whole year out. In that year, my task, I was very focused on this. My task was to learn games art. And so I don't know whether any of you, maybe some of you older listeners might remember 3D Buzz. And it was a guy called, I think he was called Jason Busby, and his buddy Zach. And they had all sorts of training tutorials in Maya and games development in general, animation and environment art and all sorts of stuff. And I paid, I think it was $99 for this, I think it was like a three disc set of all sorts of tutorials. And they were like 3 big projects. One was like modeling a car, one was animating and modeling a sort of mech robot, and another was an environment. There was an alien sort of flying saucer and stuff, and there's VFX in it, and it was a huge range of games development stuff. And I just flew through those videos. I remember there was 1 week in particular. My girlfriend had gone back to her parents back down in London, and I had the place to myself for a full week. And I barely slept during that whole week. I was just like, I don't know what was going on. I was on fire on that week, and I was doing about 19 hours a day on the computer, flying through 3D Buzz tutorials, and it was brilliant. I was just stopping only to eat really, and I'd be eating at the computer, going through all these videos. It was awesome. I was like just in the zone like I've never been in my life before, and it gave me a really great foundation. I really got a good head start on learning just basically the art and how to use Maya, really, how to use the software to make stuff for games. And then I just threw myself into it. Throughout that whole year, I was just doing as much as I could, making stuff, making environments, making objects. I modeled I had a little car at the time, a Fiat Punto. And so I went out and took loads of photos, and I made a super high res model of the car with all the doors that could animate and open, and the windows would open and everything, and that was a really enjoyable project. I really liked doing that. But so I did that, and, all sorts of projects like that, and all the while I was keeping an eye on art jobs in games, looking around. And my girlfriend found that Bizarre Creations, who were based in Liverpool where we were living, that's where we'd gone to university, and we'd stayed there. And I thought, wow, that's perfect. It's like just not that far away. And what they had on their website was 2 projects. You could download them, full of photo reference of 2 environments. And one of them was a New York City block, and the other one was like a kind of Mediterranean-y sort of villa courtyard thing. And it was just a case of like, right, download these, make them, and then send them over to us. See how we go on. So I spent a week on each one. They'd given me like guidelines on, spend 5 days on each project, and see how you go. And it's kind of like entirely optional. You know, it was quite nice because you could just download it. You didn't need to contact them. There was no pressure, anything like that. So it was kind of a really nice sort of open-ended sort of task you could do. And I mean, to be honest, you could have spent more than 5 days on it if you wanted to. They wouldn't know, would they? Really. So I did that, and then I sent them off to them, and again, I got an interview for them. And at first it was just for a contract role, which, like, you know, it wasn't perfect. I was like, well, yeah, it's not a permanent position, it's just a contract. It was just for a few months, really. But I'm like, well, I'm not going to turn that down, you know. I got the interview, and it was the guy who turned out to be my lead in the end, and our art director, I think she was. Sure, she was the art director, and again, a fairly, you know, relaxed interview. Like all the games jobs that I've had interviews for, and the jobs that I've got have been always really relaxed. You know, people are at pains to make it a sort of relaxed experience. Then they can get to see more of the real you. And yeah, we had a chat about games, and we had a chat about my portfolio pieces. They gave me a lot of feedback where I could have improved it, all sorts of stuff like that. And not too much technical questions for that. You know, Bizarre Creations were a really good company, and they were really keen on giving entry-level people a chance. And I think that's perhaps where nowadays the opportunities may be somewhat less sometimes. I think a lot less companies are willing to give entry-level people a chance, which is a shame. But I think it's a reality, really. You know, it's something you have to be prepared for. Again, which is another reason why I like to suggest the modding scene to people, because you can get that experience. You know, I mean, you're not getting paid, which sucks, doesn't it? But you know, it's just a route in, which kind of gets around that lack of entry-level positions in many cases. So yeah, I got that job, and it was just for a few months as a contract basis. And really, all it was to start off with was they had loads of textures which needed specular maps putting on for the windows. So I spent like several weeks just going through loads of textures and adding in magenta where there were windows. I mean, sounds pretty boring, doesn't it? But I mean, I was just super happy to be in a game studio doing art, you know, and not programming. And so I just put my all into that. And there were 3 of us that were doing this same contract job. And for whatever reason, they decided to keep me on at the end of it. And so after that, you know, they offered me a permanent position, and I was over the moon, as you can imagine, you know. And so that all worked out pretty well until Bizarre Creations got closed down by Activision, which is a real shame. I still feel it's a real shame to this day. Makes me sad. But, you know, I mean, I was lucky. It all worked out pretty well for me. Just a bit more luck that fell into my lap, as it happens, isn't it? Because once it became known Bizarre Creations was closing down, there were a few companies that kind of came around. They were looking to scoop up talent from Bizarre Creations. You know, they saw that, oh, well, there's a pool of, you know, experienced developers that are going to be coming, you know, looking for work, aren't they? So what I think it was, yeah, Codemasters put on a kind of like job fair thing at a nearby hotel nearby to Bizarre Creations offices, and so everyone was invited to this. And so, you know, we popped along to this and spoke to various people and all that sort of stuff, and some more of us got invited down to the Birmingham sort of office thing, and so a few of us went down there, and they showed us around, and I think they were making a rally game. I can't really remember which one it was, to be honest, but we had a good look at what they were doing, got a sense of what the job was like, and they offered me a job after a pretty brief interview, really. We Yeah, I think it was again the art director or someone like that. We broke off into little separate rooms and had a chat and talked about what sort of work we'd done at Bizarre Creations and what, standard stuff really, isn't it? What games did you like? What's your favourite sort of projects and what's your favourite aspect of the job and what particular aspects of the games that Bizarre Creations were doing did you work on, and just like sort of probing into what you'd done. A little bit more technical on that side. Codemasters, they dug a bit more. Certainly dug a bit more than when I had my interview for Bizarre Creations. But all of that, they offered me a job there, which I didn't take because I just sort of got a sense that it wasn't a job that I would find very satisfying. A lot of it seemed to really boil down to optimizing. It was very graph heavy. I saw a lot of developers staring at screens, playing a section of the game, of the racing game, and seeing where graphs spiking, and then moving some trees, tweaking this and that, and I kind of just I picked up a funny vibe as well. It just didn't feel like somewhere that I would kind of be that happy, or you get a sense of places, don't you? And I had a gut feeling, and I'm a believer in following gut feelings, and so I didn't take it. And all in the meantime, I'd applied to Rockstar as well. Several of us had applied to Rockstar as well, so I had that kind of on the go, and I was wondering whether I'd hear anything back. And lo and behold, they contacted me and said, yeah, I'd be happy to interview you. And they were coming down to Liverpool. So, it's like, it was pretty convenient, wasn't it? Like, everybody came down to us, which is pretty fortunate and not common at all. So I realized, I was in some fairly privileged positions in that, I think, maybe it was probably one of the only good things about the studio shutting down was that it was very well known that was happening, and so a number of companies were willing to sort of come down and interview a number of people in one go, and I think it was kind of nice of them, really. They were sort of feeling that, well, we didn't have to get up there ourselves, up to Edinburgh. They would come to us, and they could just do a whole swathe of people in one go, I guess. Probably what it boiled down to. And so they had a little thing going. I seem to remember it was either a pub or a hotel bar, and I asked my buddy, and he said it was a hotel bar, at least as he remembers it, in Liverpool. I just remember that it was a bar somewhere. And so each of us who'd got interviews there, we met with the art director and the associate art director. And this time I came prepared. I took my laptop with all my stuff that I'd worked on for Blur and Bloodstone. And so, I was like, yeah, right, I'm going to have stuff that is going to be working to show them. I'm not going to mess this one up. And so I was able to show, all the stuff that I'd worked on for Blur. And, again, another huge slice of luck, really, because Rockstar were needing people for GTA 5 at just that point. They were needing landscape artists to do stuff for GTA 5, and Bizarre Creations had closed down at just that point. So they saw the stuff that I'd been doing for all the mountains, the stuff on Blur 2, and the stuff I'd done for Blur 1, and I guess it kind of fit right in with what they were looking for. And, classic case of right place, right time, isn't it, really? You need a good dose of luck in all of these sort of things. Everyone who's, got jobs pretty much anywhere, don't they? You need a bit of luck somewhere along the line. Your best bet is to just try and put yourself in that position where you can sort of be there to receive some luck, isn't it? And that might just mean, applying to everywhere you can, and doing as many portfolio pieces as you can, and preparing for when some company does actually notice, Put yourself in the best position you can. And so, yeah, so on the back of that, they again just some really they were finding more out about me as a person. I think they'd seen the stuff I'd worked on. They knew I was already working on. I'd already released 2 games. I'd worked on 2 release games, I should say, and that's kind of what a lot of studios like to see, isn't it? Like, have you worked on a game that's been released, and is your work out there? Another plus point for modding, because mods are out there, aren't they? If you worked on a mod that's been properly, been released and is out there, and especially if people are liking it, you've got work out there, and you don't need to have sort of worked at a studio. So, it's really good to have your work out there in some form or another. So, I ended up getting that job at Rockstar, and the rest was history. It was great. And so then, fast forward 12 years later, and in summer of 2023, I left Rockstar, took a year out, just having a complete break and a refresh, and seeing what I wanted to do. Started casting around, having a look, what should I do? Realizing that, I still love 3D stuff and games and stuff. I just wanted a fresh viewpoint, fresh start, And before I got the job I have now, I applied to Ubisoft Reflections, which is in Newcastle, not that far from here, and they wanted a senior artist. And so I went through a whole blooming process, frankly, of interviewing with Ubisoft. And I thought it was a hugely involved and long-winded process. And I gradually got a sense of, like, I don't think I want to work here. It's not for me. They were extremely picky. There was a lot of interviewing. I went through 3 interview processes over about 4 or 5 weeks. It's quite tiring and sort of worrying in a way. It was just an initial interview with HR, which was finding out, about your work history, and quite a probing sort of interview about sort of who you are and why you want a job, and quite a lot of questions, and quite focused on that sort of stuff. And then after that, I had another interview with the art lead and associate art lead, and so again chatting about what I'd been doing and all the stuff I'd worked on, and processes and software, and kind of get a little look into what I liked in games, what games I liked, what I liked about the games I liked. Again, quite in depth, And then after that, there was a technical interview, and they were sort of probing on, processes and, all the sort of nitty gritty, about how we'd sort of UV mapped or how we'd done stuff in GTA 5 and all that sort of stuff. Maybe they were probing for secrets. Who knows? But by this point, I was getting a bit fed up with the whole process. Let's say it was a lot of work for a job that I was increasingly aware that I don't think I wanted, and it was a hybrid job as well. And it was at the time it was a minimum 2 days in the office, and they later changed it to a minimum of 3 days in the office. I think that was a couple of months later, and at that point I hadn't got a job, for which I was quite grateful, because I was like, man, I don't want a hybrid job where I have to be in the office 3 days a week. I'd been interviewed on a basis of 2 days a week, and so they would have turned around to me and said, right, you have to be in 3 days a week, and I wasn't really in a position to do that, or I didn't want to do that. So I was, I found the whole process interesting. It was really useful. Never pass up an interview, really, because they're always useful. I just felt like that's too much. It's too much, and I didn't want the job enough to sort of, put a great deal of effort into the last interview, and I think that showed. you know, and I was just like, oh, really? Come on. If you're feeling that way during an interview process, then the job's not for you, is it? Frankly, um, it's you've got to make sure that the job that you're going for is right for you. The interview process really should be as much you interviewing them as they're interviewing you, and that was the whole thing I was doing while this Ubisoft process was going on. Don't let that perceived power imbalance put you on the back foot. And so yeah, I was quite happy to dispense with that process, and I knew something would turn up eventually. It always does. And yeah, the job I do now, sort of, well, again, me being lucky, it kind of fell into my lap through a recruiter. They contacted me, said they got this kind of interesting job on a simulator, and so I went through that, and that was 2 interviews, and the vibe was completely different. The gut feeling that I got from it was completely different, and it was, I felt that was somewhere that I could be pretty happy with and have a good deal of autonomy, and I liked the people that were interviewing me, and we got on. All these things are big signs, that you should listen to. You listen to your gut, and yeah, my gut was right. My gut is usually right. And I think everybody's gut is usually right if you can listen to it. Yeah, and then so that's it to this day. And that's pretty much the extent of my experience in games job interviews. That's kind of in my style, that's a fairly long-winded story about it all, isn't it? Really. And if you want like short, sharp info, then go somewhere else, frankly, isn't it? That's not my channel, is it? I like to expand on the points I'm making, and talk it through. So that's what I've been doing, isn't it? And as far as advice, advice is it's tricky coming from one person to another, isn't it? Because everybody's experiences are different. Everybody's experience of getting into the games industry is often very different. Just work on your portfolio, do as much as you can, make as much cool stuff as you can, and just keep your eye out what's out there. Always keep looking, keep sending off CVs, even to companies that you might not even like, because as I said, you might get an interview and then you've got some practice there, haven't you? So, but just keep doing it, because it might seem hopeless, but eventually something tends to come along. So on that, I'll leave it there. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in another video at some point. All right, see you later.